Hello, brothers and sisters and YouTube channel friends. I was recently asked by a pastor friend who had been diagnosed with sleep apnea to give a lesson on the sleep as it is demonstrated and presented in the Bible and science. So I've developed a lesson series called God's Gift of Sleep, and I'd like to share that with you through this YouTube channel. So, "The sleep of the body is the gift of God" was a quote that Charles Haddon Spurgeon gave in his sermon, "The Peculiar Sleep of the Beloved," in 1855, from his New Park Street Pulpit sermon series. There are some questions that are frequently asked about sleep, such as, how much sleep do you really need? How much is too little? How much is too much? What about these terrible dreams and nightmares I have? What do I need to do to get some sleep? So many ask. And what about sleeping pills, sedatives, etc.? Also, why do babies sleep so much? Why can't I sleep? Why do I get sleepy in the afternoons after lunch? Why do I feel tired no matter how much I sleep? And then, of course, what is sleep apnea? I was surprised at how many people in our culture do not know what sleep apnea is, with it being such a common diagnosis now, especially in our seniors. So what is sleep? Sleep is a state of reduced activity with decreased responsiveness to the environment. It's also a time that we associate with a typical posture, such as lying down with our eyes closed, especially in humans. And it's the state in which, of course, dreaming occurs. Also, it is defined as a state that's characterized by changes in brainwave activity, breathing, heart rate, body temperature, and other physiological functions. Also, a state of different stages, both REM and non-REM, of varying physical and brain activity. In sleep deprivation, you can see that after one night, people will report fatigue, reduced attention, problems with short-term memory. After 2 to 3 nights, you see an increased symptoms to poor coordination, muscle twitching, impaired judgment, blurred vision, marked loss of concentration, nausea, and even slurring of speech. After 4 to 5 nights, you see much more intense symptoms such as extreme irritability, hallucinations, delusional episodes. After 6 to 8 nights, you see severe tremors in limb extremities, memory lapses and blackouts, confusion even concerning one's own identity, very unusual behaviors, paranoia, and, of course, slowed speech. After 9 to 11 nights, we see that prolonged episodes of unresponsive conscious stupor will occur, and this is the phase at which death is frequent. It is known that over 8 nights of no sleep may cause death, and these studies were done through, sadly, war torture experiments by the Germans and Japanese. All said, it is unlikely that anyone will stay awake for more than 3 to 4 days, except in extreme cases such as insomnia that is induced, or, for example, torture or coercion. Now, if you think about the sleep that we have in the United States, it's interesting to note, and I do mission work on Tanna Island, Vanuatu in the South Pacific, where their culture is very similar to that in the Stone Age. You see that in 1890 in the United States, the average sleep was somewhere between 8.5 and 9.5 hours. In the 1920s, it was still over 8 hours on average. By 1965, you see that the average was under 7.5 hours. And in 2015, we see that the average is now dipping below 7 hours for the first time. However, on a remote island such as Tanna Island, you see that the average sleep is somewhere around 9.5 hours, and that has persisted over the last century and more, with now just a few minutes less sleep on average than even a century ago. Now, in Scripture, we see that there are verses that deal with this, and I'm happy to share those with you, and I do with my patients on a routine basis. We see that sleep is not always necessarily a sign of a blessed life, and we use the example of Jesus of Nazareth in particular. It says in Luke chapter 6, verse 12, that it came to pass in those days that he went out into a mountain to pray and continued all night in prayer to God. So the ability to sleep through the night every night may not be the most spiritual or the highest form of the use of sleep and its blessing. There are some even, it says, that for they sleep not, except they have done mischief, and their sleep is taken away, unless they cause some to fall, and that is Proverbs 4:16. So we see Charles Haddon Spurgeon's quote is, of course, consistent with the Bible, and I'll show you many verses that are that example that. However, sleep is not always a sign that someone is either blessed or righteous. So Jesus slept, and Jesus' sleep cycle is referred to several times in Scripture, and Mark chapter 6, verse 46 to 48 is one of those passages. And the Scripture says, "And when he had sent them away, he departed into a mountain to pray. And when even was come, the ship was in the midst of the sea, and he alone on the land. And he saw them toiling and rowing, for the wind was contrary unto them. And about the fourth watch of the night," and what is that? That is, between 3 and 6 a.m., according to the Roman night watches, about the fourth watch of the night, "that he came to them walking on the water," as you may remember from Scripture. Also, in Matthew 26, the Scripture says that, "And he took with him Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee, and began to be sorrowful and very heavy." This is after the Last Supper with his disciples. And it says, "And he went a little further and fell on his face and prayed. And he asked them, Could ye not watch with me for 1 hour? And he left them and went away again and prayed the third time, saying the same words." So we know that over a period of the night, he prayed for at least an hour, probably several times, and obviously went that night of his life without sleep. So even the most spiritual, the most righteous, can go nights without sleep. But at the same time, we see that there are times where even the most spiritual sleeps when others can't. And this is the example out of Mark chapter 4. "And when he had sent away the multitude, they took him even as he was in the ship. And there arose a great storm of wind, and the waves beat into the ship, so that it was now full, and he was in the hinder part of the ship, asleep on a pillow." So sometimes the most spiritual thing that you can do is take a nap. So what is REM sleep? We're talking about all the stages, but when we talk about REM sleep, we're talking about rapid eye movement sleep. And we see that sleep that's normal is taken in several stages. There's the awake, alert state, and then there is the state just before one wakes up that we call REM, which is very unique. The deeper stages of sleep that we don't enter into for usually the first 90 minutes, and usually not in naps, are called stage 1, 2, 3, and sometimes 4, which are the deep non-REM sleep cycles. We see then that as we begin to arise out of stages 4 and 3 toward 2, that REM sleep intervenes, and that is when we have dreams and sometimes nightmares. Those will go generally in enlarging or in lengthening cycles through the night. Most people need 4 to 5 of these to feel rested and refreshed and have their memory circuits and their long-term memory nourished. So we see that these are the general stages of sleep. Now you can see this in another way on a sleep somnogram and EEGs, and that is you see that the awake cycle is very active. You see frequent ups and downs. You then see as we go into stage 1, that is called non-REM alpha, and then into stage 2, where there's a different waveform that's called non-REM theta with what are called sleep spindles and K-complexes. Then stage 3, that's non-REM delta, where the waves are triangular or delta-shaped frequently. And then you see REM, which has very small, very frequent, short bursts, and the oscillations and the amplitudes are smaller but frequent. Now, if you look, you might notice that the REM sleep cycle is very much like the awake cycle. And that's why we see that someone's eyes can move back and forth under their eyelids while we sleep, thus rapid eye movement sleep. Now, we spent 9 minutes on this section. I hope you've enjoyed this. We'll pick up with this topic at what is REM sleep and what does it mean in our next lesson. Thank you very much.